Bernie Marcus got fired in front of 100,000 people at a corporate convention. The 47-year-old retail executive stood on stage at Handy Andy's annual meeting in 1978, watching his career explode in real time as his own boss announced his termination to the entire company. The humiliation was so complete that security escorted him out while thousands of employees watched in stunned silence. But what seemed like professional death became the spark that would create America's largest home improvement empire. How do you turn public betrayal into billion-dollar vindication? The corporate assassination was orchestrated by Sanford Sigaloff, the ruthless turnaround specialist who'd taken control of Handy Andy's parent company. Sigaloff had a reputation for slashing costs and eliminating executives he deemed unnecessary. Marcus had spent years building Handy Andy into a profitable regional chain, but Sigaloff saw him as an expensive liability. The public firing wasn't just about saving money. It was about sending a message to every other executive in the room. Marcus wasn't alone in his corporate execution. Arthur Blank, the company's chief financial officer and Marcus's closest ally, got the same treatment. Both men were marched out of the convention center like criminals, their decades of retail experience suddenly worthless. The industry whispered that their careers were finished. At 47 and 35 respectively, they were too old and too young to start over in the cutthroat world of retail management. But Marcus refused to accept defeat. Within weeks of his humiliation, he was sketching plans for a revolutionary new kind of home improvement store. Traditional hardware stores were small, cramped spaces with limited inventory and high prices. Marcus envisioned massive warehouse-style stores that could stock everything a contractor or homeowner could possibly need. The concept seemed insane to industry veterans who insisted that customers wanted personal service, not overwhelming selection. The early days were brutal. Marcus and Blank spent months driving around Atlanta looking for investors willing to bet on two fired executives with a crazy idea. Bank after bank rejected their proposals, calling the warehouse concept unworkable. Venture capitalists laughed at projections showing stores with 25,000 square feet of retail space when most hardware stores barely reached 3,000 square feet. The rejection was constant and demoralizing. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ken Langone, a Wall Street financier, saw potential in their vision of democratizing home improvement. Langone had grown up working construction and understood the frustration of hunting through multiple stores to find specialized tools and materials. He agreed to help raise the initial capital, but warned that failure would destroy all their reputations permanently. The first Home Depot opened in Atlanta on June 22, 1979, exactly 1 year after Marcus's public firing. The store was a disaster on opening day. Shelves collapsed under the weight of merchandise, the checkout system crashed repeatedly, and confused customers wandered the aisles unable to find anything. Local newspapers mocked the chaotic launch, suggesting that Marcus and Blank had proven their former boss right about their incompetence. Marcus personally worked the floor during those early weeks, loading concrete bags and helping customers find paintbrushes. He instituted a policy of hiring experienced contractors as sales associates, ensuring that customers could get expert advice along with their supplies. This approach was expensive and complicated, but it differentiated Home Depot from traditional retailers who hired cheap labor and provided minimal customer support. The warehouse format allowed Home Depot to negotiate directly with manufacturers, cutting out distributors and passing savings to customers. A hammer that cost $8 at a traditional hardware store sold for $5 at Home Depot. Professional contractors who represented the bulk of the market flocked to stores where they could buy everything in one trip at wholesale prices. Expansion was aggressive and risky. Marcus opened 3 more Atlanta stores within 18 months, then pushed into Florida and Louisiana. Each new market required massive upfront investment in inventory and real estate, with no guarantee that local customers would embrace the warehouse concept. Traditional competitors fought back by pressuring suppliers to boycott Home Depot, creating constant shortages of popular items. The company went public in 1981, raising capital to accelerate growth across the Southeast. Wall Street analysts were skeptical about the sustainability of the warehouse model, questioning whether customers would continue shopping in stores that looked more like factories and retail establishments. The stock price fluctuated wildly as investors struggled to value a company that was redefining an entire industry. Marcus developed a company culture that emphasized customer service despite the warehouse setting. Employees wore bright orange aprons and were trained to drop everything to help customers, even if it meant walking across the massive store to find a specific screw or bolt. This approach was expensive and complicated, but it differentiated Home Depot from traditional retailers who hired cheap labor and provided minimal customer support. The 1980s brought explosive growth as Americans embraced do-it-yourself home improvement projects. Home Depot's timing was perfect, riding the wave of suburban expansion and increased homeownership. The company expanded beyond the Southeast, opening stores in California, Texas, and eventually nationwide. Each new market required adaptation to local preferences and building codes, but the basic warehouse formula proved universally appealing. Competition intensified as established retailers tried to copy the Home Depot model. Sears launched a chain of hardware superstores, while regional players expanded their footprints to compete on selection and price. Marcus responded by improving efficiency and customer service, ensuring that Home Depot remained the category leader even as imitators multiplied. By 1990, Home Depot operated over 100 stores and generated billions in annual revenue. Marcus had transformed from a publicly humiliated executive to the leader of America's fastest-growing retailer. The company that fired him, Handy Andy, had filed for bankruptcy and disappeared entirely. The sweet taste of vindication was complete when Home Depot began hiring former Handy Andy employees who'd witnessed his original humiliation. The personal cost of building an empire was significant. Marcus worked 18-hour days for over a decade, sacrificing family time and personal relationships to prove that his vision was viable. The pressure of constant expansion, investor expectations, and competitive threats created chronic stress that affected his health and personal life. Success came at the price of everything else that mattered. Marcus stepped down as CEO in 1997, though he remained involved as chairman until 2002. Under his leadership, Home Depot had grown from a sketchy startup to a retail empire with over 1,000 stores and 200,000 employees. The company's market value exceeded $50 billion, making Marcus one of the wealthiest people in America. The man who got fired in front of 100,000 people had created jobs for hundreds of thousands more. The Handy Andy humiliation that seems like career suicide actually freed Marcus from the limitations of conventional retail thinking. Getting fired forced him to question industry assumptions and imagine entirely new ways of serving customers. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you removes the barriers that were preventing your greatest achievements. The key lesson for aspiring entrepreneurs is that public failure often provides the motivation and clarity needed for breakthrough success. Marcus could have accepted his firing quietly and found another corporate job, but the humiliation fueled his determination to prove the doubters wrong through revolutionary innovation.